Imagine a world on the brink of a new decade, bracing itself for what the 90s would bring. The year was 1990. In the Middle East, a storm was brewing, a storm that would soon engulf the entire world in its tempest. The geopolitical climate was tense, to say the least. Iraq, under the iron fist of Saddam Hussein, had made the audacious move of invading its small, oil-rich neighbor, Kuwait. The world watched in shock as Iraq's forces marched into Kuwait City in the early hours of August 2nd. The invasion was sudden, but its roots ran deep. A myriad of complex issues, territorial disputes, oil production rates, and war debts had been simmering beneath the surface for years. With this invasion, they erupted in full force, shaking the world and setting in motion events that would shape the course of history. The international response was swift and decisive. The United Nations Security Council condemned the invasion and demanded Iraq's immediate and unconditional withdrawal. But Saddam Hussein remained defiant, refusing to bow down to the international pressure. Meanwhile, the United States, under President George H.W. Bush, was not about to sit idly by. Recognizing the potential threat to global oil supplies and the regional balance of power, the U.S. took the lead in forming a coalition of nations to counter Iraq's aggression. This was not just a regional conflict, it was a global showdown. The coalition was a diverse alliance of nations from Britain to Saudi Arabia, from Canada to Egypt. It was a powerful testament to the world's united stand against unprovoked aggression. Through a series of resolutions, the United Nations authorized the use of force if Iraq did not withdraw by January 15, 1991. But as that deadline loomed, Iraq showed no signs of backing down. And so, the stage was set for one of the most significant military operations of the late 20th century, Operation Desert Storm. As the clock struck midnight on January 17, 1991, a military operation of unprecedented scale was set into motion. Operation Desert Storm, a response to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, was initiated with an air campaign that would forever change the way wars were fought. This was not merely a show of force. It was a meticulously planned and executed strategy designed to incapacitate the enemy's infrastructure and defenses. The air campaign, often referred to as the Battle of the Bulge in the Sky, was a spectacle of power and precision. For 6 weeks, coalition forces led primarily by the United States, with significant contributions from the United Kingdom, France, and Saudi Arabia, launched relentless airstrikes. More than 100,000 sorties were flown, dropping nearly 88,000 tons of bombs. The aim was to weaken Saddam Hussein's command and control structure, decimate his air defenses, and destroy his weapons of mass destruction. The coalition's air superiority was undisputed, and the skies over Iraq and Kuwait became a no-fly zone for the enemy. However, Iraq was not without its responses. Saddam Hussein retaliated with Scud missile attacks on Israel and Saudi Arabia, causing civilian casualties and triggering international outrage. Yet, the coalition's resolve remained unbroken. They had a mission to accomplish, and they were determined to see it through. This was a war conducted on a global stage, with the whole world watching. It was the first major conflict after the end of the Cold War, and it marked a new era in warfare. Operation Desert Storm showcased the effectiveness of modern military technology and strategy, demonstrating the power of a united front against aggression. It was a time of tension and anticipation, with the world holding its breath, waiting to see the outcome of this massive military operation. It was a testament to the might of the coalition forces, and a chilling reminder of the destructive power of war. The world watched, captivated as the operation unfolded. If the air campaign was a show of power, the ground war was a demonstration of precision and strategy. On the 24th of February, 1991, the ground war of Operation Desert Storm commenced. The midnight sky was lit up, not by stars, but by the blaze of artillery fire and the roar of tanks, as coalition forces made their initial push into Iraqi territory. The coalition troops, a united front of 34 nations, moved swiftly and decisively. Their strategy was a carefully constructed one, designed to encircle and incapacitate the Iraqi forces. The coalition's left hook maneuver, a wide, sweeping movement through the western desert, took the Iraqis by surprise. They had expected an assault directly across the Kuwaiti border, and the coalition's unexpected approach left them scrambling. In this high-stakes chess match, coalition forces were always several moves ahead. The tactics employed were a combination of deception, speed, and overwhelming power. Through rapid advancement, the coalition forces managed to cut off and isolate the Iraqi troops, leaving them without supplies or reinforcements. Meanwhile, the Iraqi forces were in retreat. Despite their initial resistance, they were outmatched and outmaneuvered. The superior training and equipment of the coalition forces, coupled with their strategic planning, made them an unstoppable force. Iraqi soldiers surrendered in droves, their morale shattered by the relentless onslaught. Yet, even as the coalition forces advanced, they were careful to minimize civilian casualties. Precision-guided munitions were used to strike military targets, while efforts were made to protect infrastructure and civilians. This was not a war of destruction, but a war of liberation. And so, the ground war raged on. Day and night, the desert bore witness to the ballet of tanks and troops, the symphony of gunfire and explosions, but as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The ground war, as intense as it was, lasted a mere 100 hours. When the dust settled, the landscape of the Middle East had been forever altered. The aftermath of Operation Desert Storm was as profound as it was far-reaching. The ceasefire came on February 28, 1991, after a mere 100 hours of ground combat. The speed and efficiency of the operation left the world in awe, and the military prowess of the coalition forces led by the United States was confirmed. But the cessation of active hostilities didn't mean the end of the war's impact. Kuwait, the small nation whose invasion had sparked the conflict, was finally liberated. The joy and relief of the Kuwaiti people were palpable. But beneath the celebration lay the scars of Iraqi occupation. The infrastructure was decimated, oil wells were set ablaze, and the environment severely polluted. It would take years, even decades, for Kuwait to fully recover. Meanwhile, in Iraq, the consequences were even more severe. The swift defeat left Saddam Hussein's regime weakened but not toppled. Sanctions imposed by the United Nations led to economic hardship and a deterioration in living conditions for the Iraqi people, who had already suffered greatly during the war. The regime's brutal suppression of uprisings in the aftermath of the war added another layer of suffering. Yet amidst the turmoil, there were also seeds of change. The war had exposed the fragility of the region's balance of power and prompted a rethinking of alliances and strategies. It set the stage for future conflicts and interventions, shaping the geopolitics of the Middle East in ways that are still evident today. In the grand scheme of things, Operation Desert Storm was a short conflict, but its impacts were anything but brief. It changed the course of history, altered geopolitical dynamics, and left a lasting imprint on the lives of millions. Operation Desert Storm was over, but its echoes would reverberate for years to come. So what can we glean from this pivotal moment in history? As we journey back to the early 90s, we uncover the intricate web of events that led to Operation Desert Storm. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a calculated response to the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq. The world watched as the United Nations rallied together, forming a coalition of 39 nations, led by the United States to restore sovereignty to Kuwait. The military strategies employed were both groundbreaking and effective. For the first time in history, stealth technology, precision-guided munitions, and high-speed, high-altitude bombing runs were used on such a massive scale. The air campaign, launched to weaken Iraq's command and control, infrastructure and forces, was a masterclass in strategic planning. The efficient use of air power was followed by a swift and decisive ground offensive, which ultimately led to a victory for the coalition forces. However, victory came at a price. The aftermath of Operation Desert Storm was a complex mix of triumph, tragedy, and transformation. While the operation successfully liberated Kuwait, it also caused significant civilian casualties and environmental damage. It marked the beginning of a decade-long economic and political struggle for Iraq. The world bore witness to the devastating effects of modern warfare, prompting a re-evaluation of international military strategies and humanitarian efforts. In the grand scheme of things, Operation Desert Storm was a stark reminder of the power dynamics that shape our world. It highlighted the importance of international cooperation in resolving conflicts and protecting sovereignty. It also demonstrated the devastating potential of modern warfare, underlining the necessity for diplomacy, international law, and humanitarian considerations in conflict resolution. As we delve into the annals of history, we uncover the intricacies of global politics and military strategy, reminding us of the indelible mark events, like Operation Desert Storm, leave on our world.